Death is simply a change in consciousness, much like birth. There's a continuity of awareness that doesn't rely on the body. From the moment you were born, you were misled. Death isn't the end, but the start of something far bigger than you've been allowed to believe. The world taught you to fear it, to tiptoe around in hopes of avoiding it. But what if everything you were told about death was designed to keep you compliant, scared and small? They painted it as darkness and disappearance, a final stop. But what if it isn't a full stop at all? What if death is more like a door, and beyond that door is a deeper kind of presence, the kind you've sensed in your dreams, in near-death moments, or in those silent spaces between thoughts? Here's the truth you weren't supposed to know. You are not your body. And when the body ends, you don't. They told you consciousness is just the result of a brain firing chemicals. When the brain goes, so does awareness. But what if the brain isn't the source of consciousness? What if it's the receiver? Imagine a radio playing music carried on unseen waves. If you smash the radio, the music isn't gone. It's just no longer playing through that device. Some research suggests consciousness behaves similarly. It's not produced by the brain, but channels through it. The body isn't your real identity, it's more like an antenna. Modern neuroscience has found strange cracks in the idea that the brain alone creates awareness. Terminal lucidity, where people with severely damaged brains suddenly regain complete clarity before death, hints at something more. There are documented cases of children who remember verifiable past lives, or people in comas describing events they couldn't have witnessed with their physical senses. This suggests that our minds aren't stuck behind our skulls. Quantum physics backs this up. Non-locality shows that particles can affect each other instantly, no matter how far apart they are, hinting at a field of information beyond time and space. Consciousness, our most intimate experience, may also work in mysterious ways. Our brains might just be a lens that narrows our awareness. Remove the lens and the light, our consciousness remains. Many near-death accounts report remarkable clarity and familiarity, not confusion or fear. People describe floating above their bodies, hearing conversations later confirmed to be accurate, feeling more here without the heaviness of flesh. It's uncomfortable for institutions that benefit from your fear. If you know you aren't just your body or your story, what would you stop fearing? Death in that case becomes a shift in frequency, not a plunge into darkness. If that's true, everything we assume about what happens at the end is up for debate. The real you isn't destroyed, it's released. If you've ever felt déjà vu, dreamed something before it happened, or knew someone was thinking of you right before they called, you've already brushed against this bigger field of consciousness. You've sensed it your whole life. The next time someone says your awareness comes from the folds of your brain, ask why it feels so much bigger. Long before modern science, ancient civilizations spoke clearly about death. They weren't vague or mystical. They offered precise accounts and maps of the soul's journey. They treated death not as an ending, but as a rite of passage or a transition. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the moment the body gives out, and consciousness enters a liminal space called the bardo, full of visions and illusions shaped by one's own unresolved energy. For those prepared, it can bring liberation. For those unaware, it can become an ongoing cycle that leads to rebirth over and over, before they even know what's happening. The ancient Egyptians had the Book of the Dead, describing how the soul is weighed against the feather of Ma'at. It's a symbol of truth and justice. A heavy heart weighed down by regret or attachments sinks. But a light heart passes through. It's not that some god is judging you, you're measuring yourself. In Greek thought, the Orphic mysteries and Platonic writings viewed the body as temporary clothing for the soul. Death is a shedding of illusions. Indigenous teachings worldwide say similar things. Death takes you to a place matching your inner resonance, not as a reward or punishment, but because like attracts like. Modern culture often laughs off these ancient ideas, calling them mere myths. But maybe they scare the authorities of a world built on fearing death and the idea that life must be just a short, anxious scramble. If death isn't the end, if consciousness endures, then much of our struggle to accumulate, cling, and worry becomes pointless. Ancient practices like meditation, ritual, fasting, and breath work were survival tools for the soul's journey, not quaint spiritual extras. Cultures around the world prepared for death with the same seriousness we dedicate to physical survival. If consciousness continues, we should find glimpses of it. Near-death experiences, NDEs. Thousands of people from all kinds of backgrounds have been declared clinically dead. Heart stopped, brain inactive, but came back reporting the same kinds of experiences, floating above their bodies, watching the frantic attempts to revive them, seeing distant rooms, hearing conversations they shouldn't be able to hear. Many describe moving through a tunnel toward a radiant light that feels loving and familiar, meeting deceased relatives, or merging with a vast intelligence beyond words. They return changed, with no more fear of death and a profound shift in priorities. A dying brain usually devolves into chaos, but NDEs show consistent, coherent experiences, sometimes verified by doctors or relatives. Some people born blind see for the first time during an NDE and accurately describe details, all impossible under the usual understanding of consciousness. These accounts suggest insight that the mind can function without the body. For many, death felt more real than anything else, and the most common complaint is that they didn't want to return. In many teachings, death isn't seen as a switch but a transition. Across cultures, you hear stories of a liminal realm, a space between life and what's next, where you face yourself, your fears, attachments, and unresolved issues. It's not punishment, it's reflection. We attract experiences that resonate with our internal state. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize preparing for death by training the mind with meditation and other spiritual practices, because we enter that gateway with the awareness we've cultivated here. There's growing evidence from NDEs, quantum theory, and personal accounts that our physical existence might be a projection, a holographic experience. That means what we think of as solid or separate forms could be illusions. Physicists talk about a hidden order behind what we see. Mystics have said for centuries that reality is more like a dream than a fixed structure. In this view, consciousness is the light behind the hologram, and not just a byproduct of physical matter. It means that when we die, rather than disappearing, we might simply wake up or withdraw from the projection. Some who have come back from death or deep spiritual states say they remember a larger self that spans multiple lifetimes and dimensions. Death seems to unravel linear time, letting people see the events of their lives all at once, sometimes even future or alternative events. This suggests that the self we identify with is only a sliver, like a radio tuned to a single station out of many. Death dissolves the filter, returning us to a fuller version of ourselves that we had forgotten. Memory might not be stored just in the brain. It could be in consciousness itself, which extends beyond this space-time reality. If this is true, why isn't it common knowledge? Because it's disruptive. Societies built on fear and control thrive when people believe this life is all there is. Religions can impose rules and middlemen to get you into heaven. Governments and industries can keep people anxious about survival and clinging to physical security. Materialism, which insists all reality is physical, ignores or denies anything it can't measure, so it brushes aside near-death data and past life accounts as superstition. But no matter how much these experiences are suppressed or ridiculed, they persist. Countless genuine accounts defy the materialist narrative. People quietly know, deep down, through dreams, déjà vu, or the presence of those who've passed, that consciousness is bigger than the body. So how does life change once you realize death isn't the end? Fear of it softens, and without that fear, you live more freely and honestly. You see how minor social and material concerns really are. You become aware that time is precious yet not a prison, and you try to align with what feels truly meaningful. You start seeing yourself and everyone else as souls on a journey, rather than bodies competing for limited resources. Ultimately, death is not a thief, but a teacher. By facing it rather than denying it, you expand your perspective on what life is for. And when your time in this body is done, death is simply a return, a re-encounter with that deeper field of consciousness. You might come back in another form, if there's more to learn or give, or remain in that source intelligence if your journey feels complete. There's no punishment or arbitrary judgment, only resonance. You go where your state of being takes you. This knowledge was once more common. Ancient traditions knew how to prepare for death the way we train for life. The tragedy isn't that we don't know what happens afterward. It's that we've forgotten how to ready ourselves for it. And now that you've heard all this about consciousness after death, you might wonder about consciousness during sleep, because without understanding that, you don't see the whole picture of where your awareness goes when you're not fully awake.